Hello, all, and welcome to episode 267 of the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by Husky Harry, huggable homos who love film, to talk about something, of course, near and dear to our hearts, that being movies. We love them. It's mostly what we talk about around these parts, although sometimes a little TV slips in sometimes, and that's okay. This is a big week for us. We're going to be counting down our top 10 films of 2017. We're a little late to this party, but that's because some of the films that came out at the end of the year only came out in some places, not everywhere. So some of them have been a little hard to access. They went wide recently, so had more of a chance to see them. So we've put our list together. We're going to be comparing, contrasting, counting them down. But before we do that, let me introduce you to my fantastic co-host. Jim Pugliafico is back home in Tucson. Babe, welcome back. How are you?
Thanks. Yeah, it's good to be home. It's good to the last show I did was from somewhere in the southeastern United States, but it's good to be back home and seeing movies again, talking about movies. This is a big show. We're talking about our top 10s of last year. It's going to be crazy, but I can't wait.
Oh, yes, I'm excited as well. And Will Lindis is here too. Will, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Brad. Hey, Jim. Hey, listeners. I'm especially excited about this one because sometimes we get on here and we talk about movies that are bad or we talk about movies that are forgettable. But, I mean, these are our top 10 lists. This is going to be a love fest, and I'm all in on that.
Indeed. There should be no movies on our list that we don't have wonderful, glowing things to say about. Although, that doesn't mean we can't have criticisms as well. No movie is perfect. Well, some people say Rocky Horror Picture Show is. I don't know. You be the judge on whether that has flaws or not. But yes, we've got a lot of great films to talk about. Before we dive in, though, just real quick, want to give a shout out to our listeners who are watching live right now through the magic of YouTube. Austin and Benji, and looks like we've got some others here as well. Welcome. Glad to have you guys with us. As you're hearing us counting down our top 10 lists, feel free to drop your choices in the chat as well. We'd love to maybe share some of your thoughts as we go. And for those of you who are listening through digital tape delay via iTunes, Stitcher, or our website, don't worry, you can get in on the fun as well. We've got a thread on Facebook. Just find the show post for this week and feel free to join the conversation. Drop your list in the chat and we can continue the conversation there. I've been talking forever and we haven't even started talking movies earnestly yet at this point. Jim, Will, are we ready?
I think so. I think we're as ready as we're going to be.
I want to say I'm ready. I want to say I need another 4 weeks to figure it out, but no, we're good. Let's lock them in.
All right. Well, then fuck it. Here we go. Our top 10 films of 2017. Jim, I have no idea what magicness you're going to put in for an audio drop. Maybe you can even just edit out the gap this time if we don't need it, and we'll dive right in.
I'm always looking for ideas for bumper music and cool bumper music to play, appropriate or not appropriate, or something really cool.
Very inappropriate.
Very inappropriate. Yeah, anything.
Well,
yeah.
If any of our listeners out there play musical instruments and you want to give us a drum roll or some kind of trumpet fanfare, whatever that may be, feel free to email those sound clips to Brad at moviebearspodcast.com, Jim at moviebearspodcast.com, and maybe we can include them on the show. Give you a little credit. We're still looking for a theme song, by the way.
Yeah.
We've had several musicians on the show who say, "This is so rad, I'm going to make you a theme song." And then, well, it hasn't happened yet. So, if you want to be featured on our show every week by name, feel free to send those our way as well. Guys, it is time. We have so many movies to talk about, and not all the time we'd probably want. It could be like an 8-hour show, I'm sure. But we're not going to go quite that long this week. So here's what we'll do. We're going to go ahead and count down our lists. Guys, just real quick, if you want to talk a little bit about how you put your list together, is this like the movies you enjoyed the best? Or these the movies you think are the most critically acclaimed? How did you choose?
Well, I mean, I took all the movies I watched this year, put them all in front of me, and I did like a first cut and said, okay, which of these movies kind of stood out to me? I didn't use a very scientific method this year, with scores for acting or scores for directing or scores for cinematography. I just kind of went on feel, like what kind of moved me, what stuck with me in the year. And I ended up, out of all the movies I watched this year, I ended up with a list of 32 movies to start with. And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be hard. Because I'm looking down through that list and I'm like, I have to cut several of these out. But I did finally get down to a list of 10. It even pains me just to look below that number 10 and see some of those titles that are down there that I really, really loved this year. I mean, it was a very strong year for movies. When I can look down into my 20 and 22 number and see a movie that I really look back on and say, wow, I really love that movie, then that's a strong year for me. So, so I basically, like I said, I just picked the movies that kind of stuck with me the strongest and stayed with me. That's how I did it.
How about you, Will?
Yeah, very similar, Jim, because I think that there's no real way to like mathematically or formulaically compare these things. All of these, at the end of the day, are subjective lists based on how we felt about the movies, both at the time we watched them and looking back on them, because some films age better, some films age worse, the more distance you get from them. So all of those things go into the stew. Maybe it's a really good technical film. Maybe it's a film with great performances or strong direction, or with a fantastic script or a cool idea, or maybe even something that just made me feel a specific way. At no point do I look at how critically popular the films are. Because I think that gets out of the realm of like, my own subjective list. Mm-hmm. At that point, that's more of like a Metacritic / aggregator thing, which is not what we're here to do. Similarly to you, Jim, I ended up with 33 films. And what I ended up doing, and this will be the one kind of weird thing for my list, because I was having a problem narrowing it down and I was having some apples to apples comparison issues, I cut out shorts and I cut out documentaries from this particular list because it was such a weird field. So I trimmed those out first, and then that gave me a list of 30. And then I got down to a list of 15. And then I got down to a list of 12. And I turned that 12 into a 10 about an hour ago. It was that rough because this is a good year for film. There are a lot of amazing films. My 11 through 20, if I just made my 11 through 20, my 1 through 10 of another year, it would be a strong top 10 list. So looking forward to celebrating some excellent films tonight.
Yeah, it's sort of that like conundrum of having too much, right? There are years we complain about not enough great movies. And then you have a year like 2017 where, holy cow, like, it was almost impossible for me, guys, to whittle it down from a top 15. I was this close to messaging you guys and be like, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to go top 15 instead of top 10. But no, I had to kill my darlings. I had to kill my darlings and make it a top 10. So I got there. I've got my top 10. But gosh, on some of these, I mean, the difference is so slight. It's like, God, how do you decide between a 4 and a 3, in this kind of year? But we did it. We'll have to see how things shake out. Let's go ahead and get things officially rocking and rolling. Then, Jim, why don't you kick us off? What was your number 10 film?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you hit me tomorrow and asked me to do the same thing, I guarantee you that 2 or 3 of these movies would slide down, and new ones would slide up. But yeah, I'm going to start with my number 10. And again, 10 versus 9 is minuscule, but this is a movie that I think I don't remember where this movie premiered, but I actually saw this one on it was either Amazon or Netflix. After hearing about it, this movie is called Good Time, and it's a Safdie brothers movie. By the Safdie brothers, I mean Ben Safdie and Josh Safdie, and it stars Benny Safdie in one of the roles in here, and a great performance by Robert Pattinson, of all people, from the what's the vampire series, guys? Help me out.
Twilight.
From Twilight, yeah. He puts in a really intense performance in this movie. It's a very intense movie. It's about these two brothers who have had, you can tell they're really close because they've had a really kind of rough and tumble life. And, they get involved in some crimes to get out of trouble. And things it's one of those movies where at every turn, things just kind of get darker and darker and hard. It's weird because I was turned on to Josh and Benny Safdie with a movie called oh shoot, now I can't remember it. Last year at 2 years ago at South by Southwest, it was and I didn't really care for it all that much, but I could tell that there was some great style there and some great talent. So I said, I'll give this movie a go, and it's called Good Time. Look for this one. I think this is a great movie that nobody's really talking about. And yeah, Will, thank you. The other movie that I saw, Heaven Knows What, I didn't really resonate so much with that one, but this one's fantastic. So I'm looking for anything, the next thing that these guys do. It's called Good Time, number 10.
All right. Excellent. Definitely sounds like wait for it, good time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, Sammy W, who's joined us on the live chat, says
Sammy!
The soundtrack is so good, and the soundtrack to this really drives the action and drama in this film. A great soundtrack. I haven't listened to it like outside of the movie, but I plan to. So thanks, nice. Sammy, for reminding me about that.
And it looks like, babe, you and Sammy both have Good Time as your number 10 spot. So that's pretty good alignment right there.
Yep.
Wonder how the rest of the list is going to line up. I wonder if Jim and Sammy are movie brothers in this case. Yeah, I would say that there's been a lot of great soundtracks this year, but Good Time had the best score of the year, hands down. Good pick.
Mm. All right. Well, what's number 10 on your list?
So this is where things, I even pulled up my 11 and 12 just in case I wanted to call an audible, but I'm sticking with my gut. And I'm going with Star Wars The Last Jedi in my number 10 spot. I think that it's easy for me and for a lot of people to kind of dismiss blockbusters sometimes when it comes time to end of year lists, because you don't tend to have like the same level of like powerhouse performances. And a lot of times you get with these big blockbusters, you get scripts that have been sort of phoned in, see the Transformers franchise as an example of that. But what I love about Star Wars The Last Jedi is, as far as big blockbusters go, I think it could have gone a lot. It could have been a very safe film. I mean, it's Disney, it's Star Wars. They could have just had droids and Jedi running around on screen for 2 hours and called it a day. But instead, they made some really gutsy, ballsy moves with this particular film, ones that I don't think they had to be successful. And I appreciate that, and I applaud that. And that's the type of thing that I look for in these types of franchises. I was introduced to some new favorite characters and got to see some the further development of some old favorites as well. I got to see a corner of the universe, of this Star Wars universe, that I had never seen before, which is specifically the impact of all of the things that the good guys and the bad guys. Well, how does that impact the rest of the galaxy far, far away? I loved this movie, and upon rewatching it, I was even more emboldened with my choice. And I look forward to watching this one again and again and again. So yeah, my number 10 choice, Star Wars: The Last Jedi, just squeaked in.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned this movie for me, Will, because I'll tell you, spoiler alert, it didn't make my top 10 list. But again, we talked about how like crowded the top 10 competition kind of is here, and this one just made my honorable mentions list. So definitely a great film. There's a lot of reasons why this movie works really well. Laura Dern, I'm just gonna say I love you. I love that moment in the film. That's a big one for me. And in fact, if you listen to our MBP awards last week, Star Wars: The Last Jedi got quite a bit of love. So I feel comfortable with it just not making quite my top 10 list, but definitely still up there.
Yeah, well, and I get what you're saying about it's easy to overlook the blockbusters. I may be a little bit guilty of that with my list this year. There may be one or two picks we'll get to that, I don't know, could maybe be considered blockbusters, but there were a couple that I had to squeeze out of my top 10, unfortunately.
And that's why if we had done a top 15, if we had done a top 20, I think that the field would have opened up quite a bit. But we didn't. And because we needed to not, like at a certain point, we can't just have an 8-hour show where we talk about every film that came out this year, because there were so many good ones. But yeah. It's, I'll probably be guilty of it for the rest of my list as well, but I wanted to at least give some love for this film that gave me just so much joy.
We may not be able to do an 8-hour show where we talk about every film that came out this year, but we've recorded at least an hour and a half every week for the last 52 weeks. So whatever that math works out to be, that's how many hours of us talking about movies you could go back and listen to if you're really that interested. So
78 hours of like nonstop movie nerdness.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Over 3 days worth of us chatting. That's quite a lot. But number 10 on my list, maybe a film that shows up higher on some of your lists. I don't know. I'm anxious to see. But it is the new Christopher Nolan film, Dunkirk. I know critically this movie has been a lot higher on some folks' lists. But again, we talk about that crowded competition for a top 10. And sometimes, there's just little things that put some movies over others. As period pieces go, this is definitely a good one. I am fascinated by this period of world history. I think from a technical standpoint, Dunkirk is amazing. We had a chance to see it in 70 millimeter, which definitely was a really cool experience for us. But there's just so much great acting in this movie. There's so little dialogue in this movie, and I'm a fan of movies that don't have a lot of dialogue, but also don't force me to read the whole movie. And I think Dunkirk does an amazing job of also kind of playing around a little bit with perception of time, not in like a Star Trek-y way or anything like that, but just narratively, some of the mechanics it uses to tell the story from a time standpoint, what's going on when in relation to what, are really, really phenomenal here. So number 10, Dunkirk.
Great pick, Brad, because guess what my number 9 is?
What?
Yeah, we're going to save a little time here. Put it in the bank. Yeah, my number 9 is also Dunkirk, Christopher Nolan's. Not quite blockbuster. I'm not even sure how this ended up doing at the box office, but it got a lot of buzz this year, a lot of attention, and well deserved. I thought this movie was fantastically shot, fantastically, amazingly put together in terms of telling its narrative, kind of 3 different narratives on top of each other, interspersed in time, which made it much more interesting. Some really tense action, acting. We had Barry Keoghan in this movie, who we talked about, and from The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which may or may not appear on other lists, as kind of an emerging star in this one as well. Just a great film from Christopher Nolan. So yes, that's my number 9. I don't know what else we can say about that one, but and it came out early in the year too. This film came out pretty early in the year and managed to hang around. A lot of times we wait films toward the end of the year, they get
Right.
a little more push on our lists than films earlier in the year. But yeah, great film. I really enjoyed this one, especially in 70 millimeter.
Yeah, and that one did not end up making my list, although it was a finalist. It was in the top 20 or so. Again, competitive year. It's just such a technically masterful film by a technically masterful filmmaker who I've in the past been a little more critical of Nolan because I think that he has the potential to make solid films, but doesn't always connect with the human element the way that I would like. And I got that in this film. I really cared for these characters in a way that I haven't cared for characters in the last few Nolan films. So great choice, guys.
All right. Excellent. Moving right along. Will, what's your number 9?
One that I am 100% certain is not on either of your lists, and I am okay with that because part of what I enjoy about these individualized lists is that, you know, we get to see different our different tastes sort of like shine in different directions. And for me, one of the most divisive films, but one that made me think the most, was Darren Aronofsky's Mother. This film is on everybody. This is on about half of all people's like worst films of the year list and about half of their best films of the year list. And it's because this film goes to some dark, fucked up, interesting, bizarre, and allegorical places, all of which are things that can be off-putting to an audience. And I love that Aronofsky worked with his cast: Jennifer Lawrence, Javier Bardem, Ed Harris, Michelle Pfeiffer, who is for what she's in this film for, is a damn scene stealer, plus a bunch of other people who it would spoil things if I mentioned who they are. This film goes to some places that Aronofsky had a lot of trust in his cast. He had a lot of trust in his material, and he made something that was solely him. Kind of damn the critics, damn the audiences. He's made something that was entirely of his own vision, and I respect that, and I love that. And I found myself, every time I think about this film, I find myself recalling instances, recalling moments, connecting dots in ways that some other great films that left me feeling good didn't necessarily do. So yeah, Mother is one of those like bold choices that I'm very okay with having here in my top 10.
Yeah, it's interesting again to kind of be reminded of the controversy around Mother. There's a lot of gosh, I don't know how to say it without spoiling, so I won't. There's a lot of just disagreement. This is one of those films you either absolutely loved or you probably really fucking hated. So, Will, I think it's definitely a worthy film in your list, even if it didn't make mine. I love it when movies can get people talking like this, get people this energized and impassioned. So, good choice.
Yeah, well, I'm totally with you. A movie doesn't have to necessarily make me feel good or happy. But if it gives me a strong reaction and I think it's a well done film, then it'll get credit on my list. But good pick. Good pick.
Yeah, absolutely a good pick. I was looking a little bit at some other top 10 lists just from some of the critics that I like to follow and read about. And you're right, Will. I mean, it seems to be kind of a 50-50 split a little bit in regards to how this falls. So interesting to see.
Looks like Steve in chat has this one listed as well, which is awesome. I am not on an island by myself here.
You're not.
Steve, welcome to Mother Island with me.
Oh boy, we'll see if you guys can find the heart of the island and what little time you have there while we're still recording the show. My number 9 is a film that also came out earlier in 2017, and this is a little film that totally took me by surprise, especially given director Jordan Peele's earlier work. I was not super excited for this one, but Jim, you were like, oh, we got to see this, and I've always been fascinated by the idea of hypnosis. So Get Out ended up being an incredible surprise for me, and a film that, you know, when I look back on 2017, just keeps bubbling back to the surface of my mind. Jordan Peele really did a phenomenal job here, not just of directing this film, but writing as well. And, you know, it's got a great cast and I think a relevant and needed social commentary right now on how basically those who are in possession of white privilege have maybe kind of kidded themselves a little bit that certain problems don't still exist, and they very much do. And though this movie kind of ends up kind of trying to strike a balance between like being a dark comedy and like a thriller or even kind of a drama, usually movies do neither one very well when they try to be multiple things, but somehow Get Out was successful on all three levels for me. So it came in at my number 9.
Very good. Very good.
Did it happen to be your number 8, Jim?
Which
one?
Have
that perfect symmetry with Get Out there?
No, it didn't. Actually, it didn't. It didn't make my number 8, unfortunately. I don't know. Maybe we'll be talking about it later. I will. By the way, folks who are listening, we have not shared our list with each other, so we're actually surprising everybody. These are super top secret lists, only known to ourselves. Even Brad and I didn't share our top 10 list. So this is awesome. I love this kind of conversation where we're surprised at our picks. Is it my turn for number 8?
I believe it is. Yeah.
Okay. So my number 8, again, was a film that came out kind of mid-year. I think it surprised a lot of people. This film was at South by Southwest, which is not where I saw it, but it started making a sensation right off the bat. This film is called Baby Driver, and this is Edgar Wright's film starring Ansel Elgort as Baby, John Bernthal, John Hamm. This movie, Jamie Foxx is in this movie. This movie kind of swept everyone off their feet. Like, where did this movie come from? It's very different from most films. It has a great not score like a Good Time, but it had a great soundtrack. It had probably one of the best soundtracks of the year. I think we talked about it on our last show regarding when we gave out our MBP awards. But yeah, Edgar Wright's Baby Driver really surprised me. It was a great time at the movies. I loved it. Baby Driver in my number 8.
Nice. It's possible this film may show up in another top 10 coming soon to a podcast near you. So I'm not going to say a lot about it right now, but Jim, yeah, totally co-signed on Baby Driver. Great choice.
Yeah, and this one, I mentioned that there were 12 films that made my top 12. Literally up until a couple of seconds ago, I was debating on whether I would say Baby Driver or I would say Star Wars in that top 10 spot. So Baby Driver just missed the cut for me, but it takes nothing away from what is one of the most fun experiences I had at the theater this year.
Indeed. Well, Will, if Baby Driver is not your number 8 pick, what is?
So this is the first of a few films that I think the audience would have already heard me talk about. I think I put this in my top 3 mid-year list. Maybe not. I don't know. That was a long time ago. This is a movie that I originally saw at Fantastic Fest last year, or I guess end of 2016, but it got distribution in 2017, and it was known as the film that made people pass out at TIFF. It was that fucked up, it was that disturbing, and it was that shocking. And so I watched Raw, the new movie by Julia Ducournau, because I thought it was going to be a novelty. I thought it was going to be a fun, weird, messed up movie. What I wasn't expecting is one of the best and most interesting coming of age stories that I've seen in some time. The story is about this girl. She's in her first year of college at a veterinary school, and she's a vegetarian. Her whole family is vegetarians. And while during a hazing ritual there, she's forced to eat this piece of meat, and that unleashes an appetite on her, and I'll just leave it at that. This film does have some cringeworthy moments. It does have some things that will make you sort of like flinch in your seat, but it's also beautiful, and the relationship between the lead and her sister is gorgeous and interesting and infinitely compelling. And it has one of those final shots, and I won't say a thing about what it is, but sometimes a film has a final shot that just absolutely resonates with you and makes you, like, it gets underneath your skin and you can't stop thinking about it. This film has one of those. So it's called Raw. It's a French coming of age / horror film, and it is absolutely delightful.
Yeah, well, I got to see Raw this year, and like you said, it's fun, weird, different, and very, very well done. Did not quite make my list, but there are some things in here where you look and you watch, and you're like, oh my God, are they going there? Yep, they're going there. And I like that in a quote horror movie or thriller, which this one really is, and I enjoyed it tremendously.
Well, I understand Raw didn't make the top or bottom of your list for this year, but definitely understandable how it could kind of land sort of towards the middle bottom, I guess. I've heard some really great things about it. We haven't seen it yet, and that may have been a ploy just to get Raw and bottom and top in the same sentence together. But honestly, this is a film that is on my radar, and I would like to check out. So hearing you kind of bring it in at the number 8 spot for you definitely encourages me to do so. So excellent choice.
And it's on Netflix, I think, right now too. So if this is one that's on anyone's radar and they haven't had a chance to watch it, this one is. Some of these films are going to be hard. Like, we're going to talk about some films that probably aren't going to be available to stream or to rent for a few months to come, unfortunately, because that's the way distribution cycles work. But Raw is one that you can load up your Netflix and watch tonight if anyone out there is so interested.
There you go. All right, awesome. And Paul in the chat says, oh my God, Brad, at my Raw top bottom joke. Hey, we earn our explicit E in iTunes every week. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's Jim, sometimes it's Will, but whatever. So my number 8 is a movie we actually just saw a couple weeks ago, which means it was so good, it just slightly bumped something else out of my top 10. And this is a film that was written and directed by one of my favorite forces of creativity, Aaron Sorkin. He's one of those directors, one of those writers, though, that kind of burns bright in like a short period of time and then maybe needs to move on to something else. There's been a couple TV shows he's been involved with, The West Wing, Newsroom, both of which were very good, but there came a point in the series' life where he had to step away and do other things, and West Wing kept going, Newsroom did not. Anyway, I'm glad to see Sorkin make this shift to the movie format because I feel like it gives him a medium where he can be brilliant, but like be brief and not drag it on and not make things so confusing and colluded that it's difficult for difficulty's sake. Social Network, he wrote that, phenomenal. Here with Molly's Game, we get a brilliant script, and you get a lot of that walk and talk and sort of that Sorkin simpatico that is just such a treat for me to see on screen. As a writer myself, I love a great turn of phrase. I love a really good back and forth pattern. Sorkin is so great at that, but there's a phenomenal cast that makes this work. Jessica Chastain as Molly, who of course was an Olympic skier who was injured and then turned to running high-stakes poker games and got embroiled in a whole FBI investigation. She's kind of the anchor of this film, but Idris Elba and Kevin Costner, two super hot bearish daddies, come onto the scene, I think, to help give it some more meat to work with here. So really, really solid choice for me. Now, Molly's Game, my number 8.
Yeah, they definitely gave it some more meat, huh, Brad?
Which is...
They did.
Yeah. Just riffing on that theme, right? This is one of the sharpest scripts of the year, and that's not surprising because it's Aaron Sorkin, right? And I think what works so well about this one is not only is the script just like razor sharp, but Jessica Chastain is probably the perfect actress to take these words and to just make them come to life in this particular format. Like, this is one of those moments where script and lead actor are in perfect harmony in kind of a rare, special way. So I like your pick.
Yeah, I love Molly's Game too. Didn't make my top 10. I think it's like 15 for me, 15 or 16 for me. It was funny, like, we're watching this movie and I actually didn't know going in who the director was. I just heard good things about it, saw that it was playing. I said, let's get this one in. And I'm watching it, and we're about, I don't know, 25
minutes. Yeah.
about a quarter of the way through the movie, whatever. And I'm like, I turned to Brad. I'm like, is this Aaron Sorkin? This has to be Aaron Sorkin. Like, again, it's one of these directors whose style is so, writers and directors whose style is so upfront that you just, kind of like a Wes Anderson thing. You kind of know his movies just by watching them. But I love the story. It's based on a true story. I thought the acting was great all around. Everything about this movie was great. I thought it was well paced, not over long. So yeah, it just missed my list because it didn't. Maybe it didn't stick with me in some of the other movies I've seen. But great pick, Brad.
All right, excellent. Well, let's keep this party train to top 10 town a rolling and move on to the number 7 slot. Jim, what was your number 7?
My number 7, and I kind of kept mum on this when Will said he was on an island because I knew he wasn't on an island. My number 7 is Mother as well.
What?
Yes, my number 7 is Mother. That's a film that has stuck with me all, since seeing it. And I did like it when it came out. It is, I think what stuck with me about this movie was the whole metaphor. And yes, this movie is very polarizing. A lot of people kind of saw the conceit of this movie from the beginning, or maybe they even knew going in before they even saw it what the conceit of the movie was. And I think the longer you don't know what the conceit about this movie is, I think the more impact it makes on you. And that's what happened with me. It wasn't until very late in the movie that I actually figured out what this movie was trying to say. Because before that, it just seems like this really fucked up thing where I don't know what's happening. There's a lot of close, like claustrophobic shots, and there's a power struggle going on here. Mother is solidly my number 7. I could not leave this out of my top 10. Great film by Aronofsky. Michelle Pfeiffer was great in this. I want to see her in more movies, while she's still acting. Javier Bardem, just some great stuff in here. So, yep, Mother.
No matter what we get for the rest of today's episode, and I know we've still got several picks left and there's going to be some fun surprises. This is the thing that most surprised me because I came into this one thinking shit, if there's any film that I have to defend in our top 10, it's probably this one. And for it to show up on someone else's list was just very pleasantly unexpected.
Yeah. I think this is where we lost Sammy, by the way, because he was kind of counting down with us. And, I think, we weren't lining up exactly with him, but he's giving us his top 10 counting down as we go here. And when we got to number 7 and said Mother, he's like, oh boy. Because I'm pretty sure I talked to him about this movie. And let's put it this way. It's not near his number 10.
Probably, just like it's not even close to my top 30 list of the year.
Right.
I know Sam and I kind of have that feeling in common a little bit, so hopefully we didn't lose them permanently. But again, Jim, it's interesting for me to hear you bring this movie up because coming out of the film, I remember how frustrated we both were. But it is interesting how, even for me looking back, I don't actively hate this movie as much as I did when I first saw it. I think it's marinated a bit for me and it's stuck with me a little bit. And that is the sign of a good film, is it makes you think. It keeps popping up, right? It keeps being part of the discussion. Even if I didn't personally enjoy it enough for it to make, my top 100 list for the year, I think it's awesome that it is so impacting positively for others. So, Jim, very good. Excellent stuff. Will, what's your number 7 slot?
My number 7 is sort of like with what happened with Molly's Game for You, where you thought you had your top 10 pretty well nailed down, and then a movie kind of came along at the last minute and just disrupted everything. That movie for me is Phantom Thread, which is the new movie by Paul Thomas Anderson starring Daniel Day-Lewis. And it stars Daniel Day-Lewis as this 1950s London dressmaker who is just really, really well known and renowned for both how wonderful his craft is and also just how demanding he is. Until along comes this character named Alma, played by this actress who I didn't have much experience with, named Vicky Krieps. And she both inspires and challenges.
Krieps.
She both inspires him and she challenges him as kind of as his new muse. This film is gorgeous. the sound design, like every time that like something happens, whether it's the cutting of fabric or like someone scraping something across like bread or something like that, the sound just feels like you're in the room listening to it. All of the threads and all of the colors are very vibrant and very well detailed. It feels like you could touch and feel and experience everything there, which is all well and good. It was a very beautiful movie. And the first third of this movie, I kept going like, yeah, this looks really neat and this looks really cool. But then this film goes to some neat places narratively, which I will not mention at all because the trailer does a fantastic job of, this is one of the best trailers of the year because it tantalizes without giving away any of the cool details. And I think that that's best because when these things appear on screen, you're sort of like, oh, wasn't expecting this. Let's see where this film goes from here. But I say that only because it's one thing to find a film that just looks and feels and is beautiful, but it's another one that to have all of that set against like a narrative that just kind of compounds upon itself in such a unique way that by the end of it, you realize you haven't seen anything quite like this before. It's Phantom Thread. It is expanding now. It's one of those, like, it's technically a 2017 release because it played New York, LA, like last week of December. So it makes the cut, but it's one that you can start looking for in theaters like in the next week or so.
So, Will, I know that sometimes you have that like that stray phantom thread that's so annoying on a shirt. Does that make it a Phantom Menace?
I think that makes it both of those things. I think that you can also make a reference there to Affleck was the bomb and Phantoms. There's something there, right? I don't know.
Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that our movie theme night? We're just going to watch movies with Phantom in the name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, I can't say much about this one. This is one of those like, fuck the movie studios for giving these soft end of the year rollouts because my list, can't include this, and there's a couple others too that my list can't include because it just didn't open here, just hasn't opened here yet. So we'll have to see about that one in early, in the coming weeks, I guess.
Yeah, that's so frustrating too because there's films out there that like probably would very likely be in our top 10, but we just haven't been able to see yet. Like Call Me by Your Name. I don't know. It could be amazing, could be a seeming pile of crap, but we have no way of knowing until Friday when it comes out here, even though in places elsewhere it came out like December 22nd.
Oh, it's been talked about a long time. Yeah.
And I will say, at least, like, kudos to, except for one exception, kudos to, like, quote unquote film Twitter, who I think have done a mostly good job of talking about this film without spoiling it. I will say, still be careful. I was talking to a friend of mine who hadn't seen it yet, and he said, I think I was just spoiled. Someone said it has, and then he gave like a very important plot detail in it on their Twitter feed. Is that correct? And I felt so bad for him because it was the spoiler to end all spoilers. And for someone just to drop that on Twitter is the ultimate dick move.
Yeah. People don't do that on the internet. Oh, wait.
Yeah, everybody's nice on the internet. That's at least my experience. Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, my number 7 slot film is actually one that came up a little bit earlier, Jim. I mentioned that I wasn't going to say much about this movie because it might come up again, and boom, here we are. Baby Driver, written and directed by Edgar Wright, which is interesting to me because previous Edgar Wright films, contrary to everybody else on the face of the planet who has loved them, I typically have not. And so going into this movie, I'm just like, ugh, another Edgar Wright film. Do we really have to see this, Jim? And you're like, well, it could have a good soundtrack.
Something about ice cream wrappers.
Give it a chance.
That's all I know, right?
And this movie ended up just absolutely blowing me away. Jim, you mentioned the phenomenal soundtrack that this film has. I was just listening to it over the weekend, in fact. Like, I had it on shuffle and a Baby Driver song came up and I saw the album art, and all of a sudden, like, I was like walking around because we were at a local bear event this weekend. I'm walking around the hotel room, like getting changed for the pool, and like the song I was listening to was like the perfect like beat for my movements. It was totally a Baby Driver moment. But a lot of great talent in this film. I know the whole thing with Kevin Spacey's happening this year, and my God, that is so unfortunate for a bazillion reasons. I don't know if it's politically correct to have enjoyed Kevin Spacey in this film this year, but I did. I think that he gave a very great performance here. John Hamm, John Bernthal. I mean, everybody in this movie, I felt like really brought their A game here. And so, Jim, you know, it was lower on your list than mine, but definitely a great film, I feel. So, number 7.
Yeah, I think we knew kind of early on that this one would be talked about at the end of the year when this movie came out. So, and here we are, end of the year. It's getting talked about. And at least 2 of us have it on the list. I can't remember if Will said he did. I'm guessing he didn't. But,
it was the one that, like, I was between it and Star Wars for my number 10 spot. So it just fell off the list, but only barely. Technically, Phantom Thread was the Phantom Menace that knocked Baby Driver out of my top 10.
There you go. So, hey, guys, Sammy is still with us, actually. He says his number 7 was Logan, a film that shows up in my honorable mentions. Also a really great movie. Didn't quite make my top 10, Sammy, but, man, what a solid choice.
Yeah, as far as, you know, this is the one kind of superhero comic book, I guess, movie this year that really there were 2, but this one was kind of more up my alley and kind of different than most, and I think this one caught a lot of people's attention. Just a well-made film.
Indeed. All right, well, we are moving on down to number 6. Jim, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is kind of different. This is a film I didn't expect much out of. And it's a film, I think it's a Japanese film called Your Name, an animated movie. Again, kind of a coming of age movie, kind of a time travel movie, kind of a, slice of life movie, and kind of a body swap movie. It's got everything, a lot of different elements in it. This movie I really fell in love with. I haven't seen it again, and I do want to see it again. This is called, like I said, Your Name, or Kimi no Na wa, I guess, in Japanese. The writer-director is Makoto Shinkai, based on a novel, a popular novel. I'm not typically a huge anime fan, but this one really, this one doesn't have like robots and superheroes. This is about kind of like real people in real places, or felt real, in Japan, in the countryside and in the city. And it's about a young woman and a young guy who kind of find themselves linked in some strange way, and they make a connection kind of over time and space. And that's all I'm going to say. I don't want to spoil much about this movie, but it really was very, very emotional, very melancholic. I thought it was just a really well done. It was beautiful to look at. It's called Your Name. I think officially this is a 2016 film, but I think it came out here in the U.S. in 2017. So that's why I'm counting it. It's called Your Name.
Well, Jim, I'm not sure if it's going to come up again, but TS in the chat says Your Name is high on my to-watch list. And T, yeah, absolutely. This is one I feel you should see. I enjoyed it a lot as well. Jim, good pick.
Yep, love it. And it's a good choice for that spot, too, because you're absolutely right. It was a 2016 Japanese release, but it was a 2017 U.S. release. So perfect for our lists.
Indeed. All right. Will, what's your number 6?
We talk about the back part of the year being so front loaded and or back loaded, I guess is better. Another one of those films that is currently in theaters and may not be in all markets is the film Call Me by Your Name, by director Luca Guadagnino. I'm sorry for mispronouncing that. It stars Armie Hammer and Timothée Chalamet, and it's set in 1983 in northern Italy, and you've got this 17-year-old boy, Timothée Chalamet, and he is visited by Oliver, who's Armie Hammer's character, who's I think 24 years old, and he works for his father, played by the wonderful Michael Stuhlbarg, who will probably be showing up in a few of the different films that we talk about in tonight's episode. This is, I mean, it's an LGBTQ film that absolutely touched me and absolutely moved me. I found myself like there's a moment towards the end of this film where a certain character has a certain speech. I'll leave it at that. That both times I've watched this movie, it just completely wrecked my face. Which is, you know, it's like I'm not the type of guy who readily wears his emotions on his skin. Normally, I get misty, or I get like the single stoic tear, like whatever it is. And this one, both times, like I just lost my shit. And I think part of it is because everyone here is really passionate about the material. No one is phoning this in. This is an absolutely lovely film. Plus, a beautiful soundtrack with a few songs provided by Sufjan Stevens, who is just a master. It's Call Me By Your Name. And yeah, it's damn near essential cinema, I would say.
Yeah, don't mix up my sixth pick with Will's sixth pick. One is Your Name and one is Call Me By Your Name. So
yeah, good point.
Keep those two. They are different movies.
Now I want to see a mashup where the two characters from Call Me By Your Name get swapped with the two characters from Your Name, and they're all in different bodies. Yeah,
that could go in some pretty interesting places.
Indeed. All right. Well, Will, I hear that's a good pick. We'll find out when it opens here in Tucson on the 19th and we're able to see it. So we're going to, Jim, how do you feel about putting a little asterisk by our top 10 saying subject to change by seeing Call Me By Your Name?
Have to.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So for me, my sixth film of the year is yet another one that Jim practically dragged me to kicking and screaming. And, you know, like 3 of my last 4 choices have been movies like that. So, guys, this is why when your partner wants to go see a movie that you maybe are not into at all from the trailer, you know what? Have a date night. Go anyway. You never know when it can change your opinion. This film stars Hugh Jackman as the famed P.T. Barnum, who put together incredible cavalcade of circus stars. This movie definitely has a phenomenal soundtrack, a lot of original music and lyrics. It is indeed a musical film. And, you know, as gays who enjoy both football and musicals, Jim, I think this one kind of stood out to us. And we got some great acting. Although I will say, I spent the whole movie whenever Michelle Williams was on screen, not realizing it was Michelle Williams. And I'm like, man, they got poor man's Michelle Williams to be in this movie. And then I realized afterward, oh, wait. Yeah. I'm like, oh, wait, no, it really is Michelle Williams. That made me so happy. But Zac Efron is in this movie, as well as a whole lot of other folks who just, I mean, rock the bazonkadonk out of it in this movie.
Wait, obviously, what?
Rocks the badonkadonk. I don't know. It's just a term that I made up.
I feel you.
You know, I figure if P.T. Barnum can make up terms like circus, I can make up terms like badonkadonk and make them popular. But again, this wasn't a movie I expected to enjoy much at all, and it ended up coming up as my 6th film of the year. So let that be a lesson to you. Take a chance, even if the trailer sucks.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this movie. And it almost made my top 10. It's definitely solid in my top 20. It really surprised me because when I saw the trailer the first time, I'm like, oh my God, this looks like over the top, like craziness. And I think what carries this movie are the performances. Obviously, Hugh Jackman is very, very charismatic and talented. And I like seeing anything that guy's in. Zac Efron, I also really like. I know he gets maligned a lot, but I like that guy. I think he's got talent. And I thought the music in this film, the songs were, a lot of the songs, not every song, were really, really well done and very listenable and suit the story very well. and it moves along at a good clip. I mean, they pack a lot, and I think this movie's like barely over 90 minutes long, and it's this huge story with all these musical numbers. Great pick, Brad. I think this one deserves the attention.
It's definitely well, it didn't make my list. I think if I were to ask my boyfriend Scott right now, I think this would be his number one. This is the film that he enjoyed the most this last year.
Yeah.
Wow. Scott and I are in good company because he's a sweetie and a hottie, and he has good taste in films, Will. So you're a lucky man, my friend.
Yep. That's a fun one. That's a fun one to watch.
Indeed. All right. That's our 10-5. We've got 5-1 to go. So let's get it started. Jim, what came in at your number 5 spot?
Number 5 is another film we're talking about 2 years in a row, about a film by this relative newcomer to writing and directing films, Taylor Sheridan's Wind River. Another film that kind of came in and kind of blew us off our feet. As I said, directed by Taylor Sheridan, who did Hell or High Water last year, which we all really loved, and I think made all of our lists, if I remember right. This one stars Jeremy Renner. It's got Graham Greene in it, who, by the way, was also in Molly's Game, I think. And Elizabeth Olsen gives a good turn in this. I think Wind River is another film that, really solid drama about, Jeremy Renner is a tracker, and he starts helping to investigate the murder of a Native American woman on reservation land. And it opens up a lot of questions. It's a really tense drama, fantastically acted, has a lot of emotion in it. I can't recommend this movie strong enough. It's a really solid number 5 for me. Wind River.
Yeah, and it definitely has some important themes too, just about the number of female Native Americans who go missing each year and just nothing happens. It's unreported, undocumented, unfollowed up on. And I think that in addition to being like a cool little twisty-turny like mystery thriller type thing, there's also sort of a real world analog in terms of like why this film is so important to pay attention to. So good pick, Jim.
Yeah, definitely a good one. I don't know if it's going to come up elsewhere on the list, but a really, really solid choice here, Jim, for sure. Great pick. All right, Will, what's your number 5?
I feel like we're about to bank some time because I could be wrong, but I think the film I'm about to mention is going to show up on at least one of your lists, and that is 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri by director Martin McDonagh. This is a film about Frances McDormand, who plays this mother who something terrible happens to her daughter, and she feels as though local authorities, including Chief Woody Harrelson and racist idiot Sam Rockwell, that they're not doing enough to solve the daughter's murder. So she gets these 3 billboards outside of the town, questioning the police's inactivity. What I love so much about this film is what I love so much about his films to begin with. He writes characters from this almost pessimistic perspective, in that a lot of the characters that you see here have these really, really dark faults. No character is perfect. Every character here could be perceived as being wrong at different parts in the film. And yet it's also fairly optimistic in that a lot of the characters have these moments of empathy or redemption, or even just like a little scene where you feel like, okay, maybe this character's a little better than I first thought they were. And I love that no character is completely in kind of the black and white. Everything is very, very, very much shades of gray. And because you've got a masterclass of performances between McDormand, Harrelson, and Rockwell, tied to a really complex script with such solid direction, I think this is one of the best films of the year.
Yeah, well, I think we may hear a little bit more about that one later. Definitely one that made us stand up and make it, pay attention. I think when I first saw the trailer for this one, I'm like, oh boy, we're in for we're in for a great one here, I think. But yeah, with McDonough directing and Frances McDormand, it was right up my alley. So we'll see what I have to say about it maybe later.
Will, you said Shades of Grey. This isn't that climax movie thing, is it?
Oh, no, because this is a good movie.
It just goes to show you don't need 50 Shades of Grey to have a good movie.
Right.
Oh, God. All right. Let's see. For me, the number 5 movie of the year was a film directed by a woman, which is a pretty big thing, I think, in this day and age. This woman happened to be the ever amazing, fantastical Patty Jenkins. And of course, I am alluding to Wonder Woman. And we were talking a little earlier about how, sometimes these blockbuster movies don't necessarily get love on these kinds of lists, but Wonder Woman definitely does for me. I keep coming back to that No Man's Land sequence. And in case you haven't seen it yet, A, I wish that you had, and B, I won't spoil you, but there's a certain part of the movie where, like, after being told, no, you're a woman, like, you can't do this and you can't do that, and we're men, we're going to tell you what to do, she's just like, I'm Diana of Themyscira, and I will go where I please. And she does, and it's amazing, and there's tears, and there's whoops of joy, and there's fuck yes. And I think this movie just does so much on a lot of levels. Narratively, I think the story is really good. I've long been a fan of the Wonder Woman character herself, starting with the Linda Carter Wonder Woman show when I was a kid, catching it in reruns. And now to see Gal Gadot play such an iconic role as Wonder Woman and just really knock it out of the park was a big treat for me. So that's my number 5.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad Wonder Woman made your list, Brad, because it just barely fell off mine. It was going to be the one, if there was one superhero movie that was going to make my list, this was it. And but I'm glad it got some love. Just so much. I mean, everyone, a lot of friends in the Facebook community and stuff are big Wonder Woman fans, and everybody was really anxious about this movie coming out. And I'm so glad that Patty Jenkins got on this movie and hit a home run with it, because it checked off a lot of things, not just for the sake of checking them off, but this is one hell of a movie, and I'm glad it got the attention it did, both critically and at the box office.
That No Man's Land scene, that's cinematic gold.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, I can't really tell you what it's like without really going into detail. And we did that on our Wonder Woman show. So if you want to hear why, just go back 20 episodes and listen. But glad you guys resonate with that pick. Sammy, who is our honorary 4th co-host for this week, says his number 5 was A Ghost Story, which, oh my gosh, guys, I had a Sophie's Choice today. Can I take 25 seconds to tell you my Sophie's Choice?
Oh, let's hear it.
Of course.
Okay. I am cognizant that I didn't get to see all the movies I wanted to see this year. So I was kind of like, well, all right, I'm going to take some time today. I'm going to watch a movie. But shit, I only have time to watch one movie. And it was Battle of the Sexes or A Ghost Story. And I ended up going with Battle of the Sexes because Billie Jean King and Emma Stone. And, I'm sure both are great films in their own right. But I only had time for one. So I'm a little bummed. I still want to see this one a lot, Sammy. So hearing that it made your list at such a high place encourages me even more.
I think it's one of the more again, like Mother, I think, maybe not as quite as much as Mother, a divisive film. People really love this film, or they kind of don't like it.
It's very possible I might be talking about this one in a moment, so I'll save some time.
Okay.
All right. Well, then let's move right along. Jim, what came in at your number 4 slot?
The biggest film on my list, big in terms of box office, big in terms of popularity, I think, is Pixar's Coco. That's my number 4. Yeah, guys, I mean, it's hard to keep a film like this off my list. I just don't think this film hit so many notes for me. And pun intended.
Uh,
I love the musical aspect to this. I thought the cultural treatment of this movie was perfect. I thought for a movie that could have gone really, really badly, really, really poorly in this climate. And I thought it was a well put together film, great music. The voice acting was great, direction. It moved along very well. Of course, it made me cry. It's a Pixar movie. But as I said before, this movie made me cry in spots that normally movies wouldn't make other people cry. But just because it's so beautiful, it was gorgeous. Pixar's Coco is my number 4. I don't know if it'll show up on anybody else's list, but solidly on mine.
Very nice. Didn't quite make mine, but I totally get the love. It will make you cry.
Yes.
Remember me. You're not my number 4. Remember, Coco.
Because you might come up later.
Really good pick. I will say nothing else. We're gonna bank some time, maybe. But Jim, great choice. Well, what you got for number 4?
Yeah, so this is Brad. You just mentioned Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman, directed by a woman. I've got another film directed by a woman that just absolutely blew me away, and it was Lady Bird, written and directed by Greta Gerwig, who, it's no secret, I think every time I so much as think about Greta Gerwig, I come on here and I declare to our entire audience that she's like the best thing ever, and I don't fight anyone who says otherwise. And this film was no different for me. There is so much of Greta Gerwig's story woven through this this delightful little tale about this girl back in 2002 who she's 17 years old, and she's in Sacramento, California, and she's fighting with her mom. She's Saoirse Ronan. Her mom's Laurie Metcalf, and the two of them butt heads. It's this delightful little coming of age story set over that entire year. Saoirse Ronan has really stepped into her own as a lead. I think that we saw her in Brooklyn and she was really good here, but seeing her with what she did here was remarkable. Laurie Metcalf gives what I would consider to be, if we're talking like Oscar stuff, the supporting performance of the year. I think that Laurie Metcalf helps make this movie what it is. She's not on screen the entire time, but when she is, she's an absolute dynamo. This movie reminds you what it's like to be 17 and to be living from emotion to emotion and to feel everything so intensely and to not quite understand your place in the world, to not quite appreciate where you're from, and to always kind of want something else. Lady Bird is one of my favorite movies of the year, and it is totally worth watching.
Yeah, well, saw this one. I really liked it. Did not make my list. God, we could make a whole list just of coming of age movies this year, right? With Raw and Lady Bird and God, we've got
Call Me by Your Name. I've got a few of them on my list.
Yeah, exactly. There's a whole bunch of them. So we know where Will's soft spot is. But yeah, Greta, a great, not really her directing debut, but I think her biggest film to date. Yeah, I like this film a lot. It just couldn't make my list with everything else I had to cover.
It'd be interesting if like an outside like psychological data analyst were to come in and listen to our top 10 shows from the last several years and put together like a psychological profile of like the best type of movie for us and see what they come up with. I wonder what the pattern would be.
Just get like, what I want is that exact same profile, and they create a custom movie for each of us. Just like, Will likes Greta Gerwig, so she's going to be involved. Greta Gerwig story, and Brad likes this type of story, and he's not a big fan of Sam Rockwell, except in these types of, like, basically take all of these data points from 267 episodes and to basically create bespoke films for each of us. I would like that.
So what you're saying is we're going to get a Greta Gerwig directed movie written by Aaron Sorkin starring Sam Rockwell next year.
Yeah,
you know
maybe.
what? Not only that, but I think the premise for how they would get this information is prime material for season 5 of Black Mirror.
There you go. That's a little scary, but sure, totally. My number 4 film is actually one that came up earlier. And this film is, speaking of coming of age, is about two young characters. There's a little bit of an age difference between them who find each other across impossible differences. Jim, you know where I'm going. This is, of course, Your Name. I gotta tell you, I fucking love animated films like this. A few years ago, we had the Tales of Princess Kaguya, and films like this have such a phenomenal score to go along with them. It's not just the beautiful artwork and animation on screen or the incredible stories that the writers write, but I think the score is so intrinsically linked to the emotions that you feel sometimes. And some movies will take it too far. They're like, oh, this part's really sad, let's get all the violins to play to force the audience to feel that way. And I feel like Your Name doesn't so much do that as it does just has something kind of soft and evocative in the background without it being like a heavy-handed, emotionally manipulative score, if that makes sense. So, Jim, you talked about the beautiful artwork and animation earlier. Put it together with that score and this amazing story, and I think you just absolutely cannot go wrong here. So, totally co-sign, Jim. Your Name is my number 4.
Yeah, on our watch again list for sure when we have some time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
In that slow time in 2018 that's coming.
Like the 3 weeks that are about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to Sammy's number 4, which he says was The Beguiled, which I've also heard really good things about.
Great pick.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people have been enjoying that one as well. So there you go. Jim, your number 3.
My number 3 is a movie we've already talked about called A Ghost Story. This is director-writer David Lowery's kind of little side passion project that he did while he was making a totally different film for Disney called Pete's Dragon, with Robert Redford and Jessica Chastain and everybody. He's making this little movie off to the side with Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara, called A Ghost Story. Very melancholy, very meditative kind of movie. Again, not a lot of dialogue in this movie. You've got a guy walking around in a sheet, basically, and that's no spoiler. That's most of the movie, but it is kind of an exploration of loss and grief, and not only that, but it raises a lot of questions about our existence and our time in life and our place in the big picture. And that's what I liked about this movie. I love David Lowery's Ain't Them Body Saints as well, with Casey Affleck. This is a guy I'm going to keep an eye on. A Ghost Story, definitely in my top 3 this year.
I'm going to bank some time. I'll come back to it later.
Great.
All right. Consider it banked. All right. Will, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is by Sean Baker, who is a filmmaker who I think he understands the human condition in a way that a lot of people don't. And I think that as a filmmaker, he's able to do more with less than a lot of people are able to do. This film is The Florida Project. His last film was Tangerine, both of which I think ended up making my top 10s for their respective years. The Florida Project is just set over this summer. You've got this 6-year-old girl named Mooney, played by Brooklyn Prince, who got one of our surprising performance awards last week. And she lives in this extended stay motel with her mother, played by Bria Venati, something like that, who was discovered by Sean Baker on Instagram, of all places. And it just shows this sort of summer in the life of this girl who kind of lives in this, it's sort of in this extended stay hotel is in the shadow of Disney World. They have next to nothing. The mother is not what we would consider to be a good mother. She's so good here, and that only works when you have like when you have a 6-year-old actress. That only works when the director is really utilizing her well, and that director does. Plus, we also have Willem Dafoe show up here in one of the most charming and pleasant and heartwarming roles that I've seen Willem Dafoe play in quite some time. You know, I think of kind of modern day Willem Dafoe as creepy character actor guy, right? But for him to be sort of the heart and soul of this film is a breath of fresh air. The Florida Project is one of those movies that kind of briskly moves scene to scene because it's shown through the eyes of this 6-year-old girl. And so if you're looking for like an incredibly tightly woven narrative, you're looking in the wrong place. This is more of an experiential look at this girl's life. And I think because of that, it is so much better than a lot of other films that tackle this same type of material. So the Florida Project, go see it.
Definitely co-sign here, Will. This movie is one of my honorable mentions that just barely missed my top 10 list. But definitely a strong outing here. And you know, I have a couple issues with it, but I mean, overall, I think it's pretty wonderful. And we know how much Jim hates child actors sometimes. And I feel a little bit of that too. But I think, I don't know, we got some really good acting here without it coming across as sort of like, I'm a pretentious, cute little kid. So
it's like, no, it's not precocious. And that's what a lot of these kids are. Like just so precious, they make you sick to your stomach. This film is not that.
No.
Indeed.
Not.
All right.
I'm shutting my mouth for now.
I have a feeling I may know why. For me, my number 3 movie is again one that's already been talked about, and so I won't go on at length. We'll bank a little bit of time. This film involves a young boy on a search for his familia in the afterlife, and that, of course, is Coco, the newest animated outing from Pixar. You know, Jim, you talked earlier about the beautiful animation and art style, and I want to talk just very, very briefly about that animation, particularly as it relates to like this land of the dead. We saw Book of Life before we went to see Coco, and it's interesting to see kind of the same concept, like drawn and imagined in different ways, and where I feel like Book of Life, even when it was like colorful and happy, I don't know, it was just weird and discordant and bizarre. And with Coco, this land feels magical. It feels lived in. It reminds me a lot of like is sort of the world building that Inside Out did, for instance. So this movie is very touching, has phenomenal music, makes me bawl, or as Paul says in the chat, cries in Spanish. So really, really great film. It is my number 3 pick.
Yeah, Brad, I'm surprised we haven't seen this one again yet, because we both said we wanted to see it a second time. I'm almost afraid to go see it and have my heart ripped out again. Like, well, I shouldn't say that. I have my heart melted. How about that? This one doesn't like try to necessarily rip your heart out. It just like it just kills you with beauty. I mean, and that's what this movie's about. And we can examine those reasons why, but I think, like I said, I think sometimes these big Pixar movies tend to get missed at the end of the year because it's kind of thought that they have their own category, right? Anytime there's a Pixar movie, it's generally going to get nominated for Best Animated Feature and likely win. So it's never really in the discussion of movies in general. Which is kind of unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. So I'm doing my best to give it its due.
This year, Coco, you get the Pixar Award. All right. And Sammy from Denver says his number 3 was Get Out.
Are you sure he's not just telling us
Get out?
No, no, that's again, great pick. I think that what Jordan Peele did with that particular film was not only important for like how good that film is itself, but I think that this is the type of film that comes along and kind of changes the way that we as a viewing audience look at film in general. I think that there's going to be a lot more chances being taken with persons of color behind the camera than have been in the past because of the success with this film, and I love that.
Indeed.
And
All right.
And Moonlight from last year.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. All right, we got 2 and then 1. We are getting to that point where our most favoriteest movies of the year are now on display.
Yeah.
Jim, what was your number 2? And if you don't mind, what just maybe kept it from being your number 1?
Sure. I don't think there's any more surprises on my list. Will, I think, has a surprise, but my number 2 is 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And what kept it out of number 1 was the strength of my number 1, which I'm not gonna was just like the effect that the number 1 movie on my list had on me this year. 3 Billboards was a movie I admired. I really had a good time watching it, but number 1 like affected me more, and for that reason it solidified itself as number 1. And so 3 Billboards, while I love it for all the reasons we talked about already on your lists, Frances McDormand, fantastic. I'd really like to see her get that Oscar. Even if she doesn't, I think it's the best performance of the year. I think 3 Billboards was just a wonderfully written movie. I thought the script was so good. And like you said, Will, before, the characters are not caricatures. They're shades of gray, and they make you, it makes you think. It makes you examine these characters and what makes them tick. So, 3 Billboards, my number 2.
All right. Excellent. Well, I don't know if it will come up again later on, but it's a possibility. But we'll just say, Jim, definitely a very, very strong choice here. Great stuff. Will, what's your number 2?
So I think this is what Jim was alluding to with the I might have a surprise or another trick up my sleeve coming up. And this film isn't on anyone else's list so far, unless someone has like a weird sleeper hit that hasn't you guys haven't talked about yet. And that's Personal Shopper. This is a film directed by Olivier Assayas, who also gave us The Clouds of Sils Maria last year, the year before, I guess 2 years ago. This film stars Kristen Stewart, who I'm very firmly in the camp of thinking that she's one of the best actresses of her particular age working right now. She gets a lot of flack for the Twilight films, and maybe deservedly, because those movies are garbage.
Her and Pattinson.
Yeah,
right?
But both Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart turned in 2 of the best performances of the year. And she consistently does that. Just look at her IMDb: Clouds of Sils Maria, Camp X-Ray, that spot in the movie. I can't. I'm forgetting the name of the movie about Alzheimer's, and I feel stupid for that. Still Alice. Still Alice.
Still Alice. Yeah.
Personal Shopper. So Kristen Stewart plays a personal shopper for a celebrity. She lives in Paris, and she is also a medium. She has the ability to see and interact with ghosts. So too did her twin brother, but her twin brother died. So she's here in Paris. In addition to making a living, she's also trying to reconnect with her brother from the other side. But then she starts getting these weird text messages and has to deal with that. This is a very understated and moving movie. It has a lot of mystery to it. Like, it makes you think your way through it, but at the same time, it does do a really good job of answering itself all the way through. This isn't one of those movies that is ambiguous for the sake of being ambiguous. By the time you get to the movie, if you're paying attention, you should know what's been going on with this film. But at the same time, doesn't hand feed you every little step along the way. Kristen Stewart is a knockout. Olivier Assayas has this really impeccable pacing. It's slow burning what he does with his films, but it always moves forward. It always moves forward to that next scene, to that next moment, to that next reveal. Personal Shopper is not the type of film that a lot of people saw or a lot of people experienced last year, but they absolutely should have. If it wasn't for the fact that my number one film of the year was just so damn good, I think this one could have very easily been my number one.
Awesome, Will. Yeah, I saw that. Wow, a while ago now. And Kristen Stewart was really, really good in it. I like that. Paul in Texas there said, yeah, he just saw it and it was really understated and great. I think understated is a really good word for this movie. There's a lot going on, that kind of under the surface, not flashy at all, but yeah, definitely a strong choice for this year. Well, I know, and it really resonated with you.
All right. Excellent. All right. So my number 2 pick for this year, again, is a film that's already come up, and I'm just going to put it out there. It's Wind River. I know I talked a little bit about this movie last week when we handed out our MBP awards, but writer-director Taylor Sheridan really knocks it out of the park here. And it helps having talent like Jeremy Renner and Elizabeth Olsen and everybody else involved with this movie. It's a powerful story, and it's one that, unfortunately, I just don't think enough people have seen this movie. And so I hesitate to even give impressions of it beyond just saying it's my second favorite film of the year. But for me, films that really make me feel something are the ones that resonate and stick with me the most. This film made me furiously angry. This film made me howlingly sad. There were some quiet moments of inner character humor going on that kind of brighten things up a little bit sometimes, but not in like it's really sad, we better make it funny way, but more like a damaged people trying to help each other out by being funny way, which made it sincere for me. Very true to life. So this movie made me feel so many things. Definitely, if you've not yet seen Wind River, really recommend that you check it out. It was on iTunes earlier. It is available right now on VOD. So check it out. Give it a watch. I don't know if you'll like it quite as much as I did, but definitely worth a watch.
Yeah. Great. Great one, Brad, for number 2. Man, it's surprising that this guy, Taylor Sheridan, is writing and directing such great films. But kind of like all of a sudden he's on the scene and everything he's doing is turning out great. Wow. I mean, I'm really excited for what he's doing next. I'm going to go look right after the show and find out what he's doing next.
There you go. We'll put it on our radar, babe. Our 4th honorary co-host, Sammy, says his number 2 was Dunkirk. We talked about Dunkirk a little earlier in the show, but yeah, Sammy, absolutely a solid choice. And Paul says Wind River right at the end with one sentence pushed him over the edge to tears. He was gripped by the whole movie and finally pushed over that edge. He wishes more people would actually see the film. Totally co-signed with you there, Paul. Agreed. All right, guys, it is that time. We are going to reveal our number 1 films of the year. But before we do that, let's bring a quick message to you from our sponsor. No, I'm just totally kidding. Let's do it. Number 1s. It's time. Jim, what was your favorite movie of 2017?
My favorite movie from the moment I saw it until now, and was not, even with all these great movies, was not toppled, is Sean Baker's The Florida Project. Just something about his last couple of films, and this one especially, that handles and I know they're actors, but his subject matter is so human and humanistic without being cloyingly so, or too sweet or too sad. It's just got this tinge of realism to it that just rings authentic to me, and it really just like got into me and stayed there. Like we said, the fantastic performance of Brooklyn Prince, the actor who played her mother, Willem Dafoe, just a really unexpected, kind of out of left field, subdued, solid performance. I would love to see him get recognized at the end of the year for that performance. Everything about this movie is great. And I just realized that from number 6 up through number 1, Your Name, Wind River, Pixar's Coco, A Ghost Story, Three Billboards, and Florida Project are all very human stories. They're all they're all character stories and have strong human emotions at the core.
Is that because they focus on humans?
Yeah, so stick that in your psychoanalysis, psycho movie analysis for me and see what you come up with. But yeah, the Florida Project, hands down, number 1.
All right. And Sammy says that Florida Project was his number 1 as well, babe. So yet again, you and Sammy are like perfectly aligned.
On number 8, number 1, at least.
Well, you know, that's all right. Sometimes you want to align with the bottom and sometimes with the top. So either way, it works out well. Will, what was your number 1?
And aside first, I want to mention that just this this year's list has been so much fun because while last year's list was fun too, we ended up with several what we joked about at the time as hat tricks, like movies where like, okay, yep, this one appeared on everyone's list, this one appeared on everyone's list. And I think 5 of our top 10 movies were on all 3 of our lists this year. And so far, unless Brad, you pick what I think you're going to pick, we don't have any hat tricks yet. We may end up with just one by the end of it. But last year we even had our number one were all exactly the same. So I love that our lists are so different. Jim, your number 1 was my number 3. So I think it is very fitting that your number 3 is my number 1. I chose A Ghost Story by David Lowery. When it comes down to picking my favorite film of the year in terms of the list, I'm really looking at 2 things: how it made me feel, and also how well did this film match the filmmaker's intentions. Because I think intentionality is a big part of a film. Like if you're trying to be funny and your movie doesn't land the jokes, that's not a good movie. In this case, this is a movie about loss, about grief, about what it's like to miss someone and to be separated from someone and to cling to these emotions, even when it's on the other side of this veil of life. I rewatched this the other night, and I mentioned before, like, you know, it takes a lot to really break me in a movie. I had to pause the movie 5 times on my second rewatch of the movie because I was crying so hard that I needed to like collect myself before I could keep watching. 5 times on a rewatch. I can think of no movie that I've ever watched that has impacted me that strongly. Past that, though, the way it impacted me, the intentionality that I mentioned before, I think that David Lowery perfectly matches some of these scenes of loss so beautifully without having to overdo it. There's a scene, you may have heard, the Rooney Mara eats pie scene, which is bold in the way that they do it. No spoilers, Brad. No spoilers, Brad. Just saying that it is a bold scene just because of how they shoot it. But what I think is so great about it is that it so perfectly equates to something that we experience. You know, this is something that I can totally see any of us experience if we'd been in the exact same situation. There is a kind of an Instagram-y filter to this film. The way everything is shot makes it look very striking. The performances, the music. There's a song that is performed in this movie at about the 2/3 mark that just absolutely sticks to me. Like I listen to it very regularly on my iTunes playlist just because it's that good. I can't think of enough good things to say about A Ghost Story. I will continue to watch this movie and champion it probably until I'm a ghost wrapped in sheets as well. And if you haven't seen this movie, please give it a shot.
All right. Excellent. I feel like we need to just compile a list of the movies that came up the most in our top 10 list and make a top 10 list out of those movies. And that could be like our official MBP top 10 like recommended viewing list for 2017. So many great films. I know I haven't seen some of them. Definitely looking forward to catching up with the ones I haven't seen yet. For me, my number one is one that came up a couple of times earlier, and that is Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. This is one that I was pretty sure I was going to like because, come on, Frances McDormand. She's phenomenal. But also, from the first trailer that I saw, you could tell that this movie was going to deal with something very powerful. In the chat right now, we've kind of got this discussion going on around the idea of loss and how characters respond to loss. And Frances McDormand is one of those, actors who, if she wants to summon like howling despair from the pit of her stomach, somehow she is able to do that. And it doesn't seem like a woman just screaming at the camera. It seems like she is a mother legitimately, like, bereft and just feeling scooped out and hollowed out, over the disappearance and or death of her daughter. And so, for me, this movie just strikes an incredibly real chord, but it's also got some surprise performances that help kick this up to the number one spot. As great as Frances McDormand is, she's not enough to make a whole movie number one for me. I think the sort of counterpart here is Sam Rockwell in this film. And I know I talked about it a little bit last week for our MBP awards. He is not traditionally an actor that I enjoy. I don't. He has a quirky, like, comedic styling, and, he looks like an asshole, and he seems like a sly fucking asshole, and I just, it doesn't resonate with me. But playing a sly fucking asshole in this movie was a perfect fit for him. And I think there's an interesting arc to that character and what happens to him in the film, and between he and the Frances McDormand character that is just incredibly, incredibly powerful for me. So that is my number one pick of the year. And guys, I think that's a wrap. Yeah. All right.
Yes, it is. And we've gotten through our top 10s in less than 2 hours, apparently. Hey, there's a question from Billy Bob, Texas, in the chat. Have you watched The Way Back? Well, yes, we have. Brad has seen that.
I have, and I will tell you that is only the second movie where I've semi-liked Sam Rockwell in a film. And yes, I did like him in that role. I felt like, he was less annoying to the point that I could enjoy his performance. But man, that was one of my favorite films. What year was that?
Year? Oh God,
2013. That was my number one that year. That was, and it was maybe not as up against as strong a field, but that movie had the goods, especially that "Trampled by Turtles" song that played in the last part of that film. So good.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, guys, real quick, how about some honorable mentions? What were some movies that just barely made, or rather didn't make the cut, Jim?
Well, we mentioned the ones that didn't make it. I'm surprised that it didn't make it on any of our lists this year. That's interesting.
Honorable mention.
Yeah. I want to say we just saw it. I saw it for the second time today. I, Tonya was great. The Shape of Water. Like, come on. None of did we have that on our list?
Nobody had it in their
list. Like, that's amazing.
Hold on. Our honorary fourth co-host, Sammy, had Fish Dick on his list. So it counts.
He did. Movies like The Hero that we saw. Sam Elliott's movie, The Hero. I love that movie and just barely made my list. And The Big Sick, which I love this year, also just missed my list.
All right. Will, how about you?
Yeah, so just listing off the names, the ones that were in my 11 through 20 slot: Baby Driver, Logan, The Shape of Water, BPM, which not enough people are talking about, Killing of a Sacred Deer, Get Out, Good Time, Columbus, super understated. Not enough people are talking about it either. Dunkirk's and It Comes at Night. I Don't Care, Come At Me.
There you go. All right, some ones for me that are a little different and some overlap. Patty Cakes, which
yes,
I life, but
Patty Cakes love.
Yep. Pincushion, which is a little indie. I have no idea if it's getting distribution or what. Fucking love that movie. The Florida Project, Cars 3. I don't know if that's a surprising choice. I was like, oh yeah, that was this year, right?
Yeah.
Logan, The Hero, Sam Elliott, Star Wars, The Last Jedi, and then guys, The Shape of Water was number 11 on my list. So just barely missed being in the top 10.
Wow, what a year in movies this was. It's crazy good.
I mean, Guillermo del Toro is one of my absolute filmmakers. I think he's pretty high up there for the two of you as well. And Shape of Water it's very easy to say is one of the best films of the year. And for it to not make any of our top 10 and yet be something we think of as so fondly, that just speaks to the strength of this year. Like, The Shape of Water is, give me 2015, give me 2016, and this is a top 5 film.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an important call out to make here because, you know, you have films like this, just because they're not on this top 10 list does not mean they're bad films by any mean. It just means there's only 1 through 10 in that list, and something's got to beat something else out. So, you guys in the chat have thrown out some really great films as well. We've kind of been sharing them as we go along. But hey, if you're listening via digital tape delay through iTunes, Stitcher, or our website, it is not too late to share your lists with us. We would really love to hear what you guys think. So if you're listening on your morning commute to work 5 weeks from now, I don't care. Go back, find the Facebook post on the Movie Bears podcast page.
Hey, you do a lot of talking on the show. You're allowed one flub. Come on.
Well, that's good. That's my one flub for the show this week, apparently, my freebie. But we would still very much love to hear. And what's interesting, guys, I went back and I looked today. Our top 10 films of 2013 got 4 listens so far this week. So people are going back and checking out that back catalog. And it got me thinking, like, man, you know, like, how cool would it be if you could go back and generate a list and compile all that together? So maybe we can generate like the top 10 films of, I don't know, the 2010s or something.
Oh, that would be so much fun. I know we did our top 10 of the 2000s a while back when that BBC list came out.
Yeah,
it might even be fun to do sort of like somewhere in the middle of the year, just when we have like, you know, like, oh man, there's like no good movies out this week. What about the top 10 films that we've main reviewed on the show? That could be fun too. It's just sort of like a best of us list. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll even call it This Is Us, and it'll be very heartfelt and touching.
It's funny you say that, because Steve just put a comment in right at the same time you said that.
Oh, really?
He was watching This Is Us.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Oh, goodness. Well, maybe we'll get Chris Sullivan to come on the show and do it with us, and it will be complete. And maybe he'll do it shirtless. One can hope. Anyway, guys, we're long in the tooth. In past years, we've even had to break this show into 2 episodes. So the fact that we got our top 10 in within...
Got our top in?
Yeah, we topped this one well.
I think it speaks well. In any event, Steve in chat says, I heart you guys. Steve, we heart you and everybody else who's been hanging out with us in the live chat tonight. Sammy and Paul and Bobby, and let me get out my romper room mirror. Everybody else. Also love our listeners out there in iTunes, Stitcher Land. Thanks so much for being part of the show and listening week over week. But the conversation doesn't have to end with the end of this episode. Jim, Will, if people want to find you guys and chat online, how can they do so?
You can find me at on Twitter at JJP Out West, all one word, JJP Out West, and on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico. That's where you find me.
Boom. Will, how about you?
Yeah, look for me on Twitter at Whatever Cove. Look for me on Facebook. I'm William Lindis. There are two of them on there. One of them is me. One of them is my father. I'm the one you want to speak to. So just send me a message first. I'm the one with the beard. I'm also on Letterboxd, which is where I track and review every film that I've watched since 2012, including my top 10 lists and my festival lists. So come look for me. I'm William Lindis on Letterboxd. I'd love to make a new movie fan friend over there.
Rock on. And in the live chat right now, there's some talk about wishing we could see top movies with everybody. I totally envision a day where maybe it's like Ready Player One in the Oasis. Maybe it's like VR right now where we can all strap some goggles to our eyes, put some earbuds in our ears, and all go to the movies together, regardless of where we're from. A virtual movie theater, hang out with your friends.
We're pretty close to that, aren't we?
We are. We totally are. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody has a VR headset right now, so we can't do that. But, you know, it was like when we were watching Jaws with a bunch of random people, you know, through Oculus. It's pretty fun. So, Paul and everybody else, maybe one day we'll get to see these films with you guys in virtual reality. In any event, you can find me online if you want to chat. Find me on Twitter at iBradPro. It's there on the screen for you if you are watching on YouTube. You can also find me on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. My Facebook is set so that only friends of friends can add me. That has solved the female robot problem for me. But it does mean sometimes if we don't have mutual friends, you can't just hit the add friend button. So either way, send me a message first. I would like to verify that you're not a spam bot or, you know, a serial killer. And we can talk from there. Guys, it's been a fantastic week. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us in the live chat. It's been great hanging out. Thanks for listening. And here is to another amazing year of cinema. If 2018 is half as good as 2017, guys, I think we're going to be very happy indeed.
So excited. Love talking movies with you guys. Looking forward to talking about so many more movies with you guys.
With all those bearded guy movies coming out, how can it be a bad year?
You mean Den of Beards?
Den of Beards, yes. Den of Beards and 12 Beards in the Desert or whatever that movie is. Yeah.
And Sick Beardio too. Soledado.
Yes, that one too, yeah.
Yeah, totally. All right. Goodbye, everybody. See you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye, all.